Welcome back to the Price of Admission on the 100th episode. Today we'll dive deep into a story that has equal parts raw, inspiring, and unexpectedly funny. My guest, Jared Smearman, is a Navy intel vet, now business owner, and kind of considered unfiltered, confident, and a generous person by many. But behind this confidence is a man who's battled an identity crisis, some mental struggles, and the challenge of rebuilding relationships. Jared doesn't hold back as he shares his story from finding purpose after leaving the Navy to owning a dog training business and leaning into faith to overcome life's hardest battles. This episode is about vulnerability, resilience, and the power of community. Whether you're navigating your own challenge or just looking for an incredible story, this one's a good one. So settle in and get ready to meet Jared Smearman, the man who breaks the ice, shatters expectations, and reminds us all that asking for help isn't a weakness, it's a strength. All right, today, Jared Smearman, Navy football class of 2008, class of 2009. You reside in Greenville, South Carolina, now a business owner of a dog training franchise, which is awesome. And I want to dive into that because I got a dog that needs some training, or
Absolutely.
at least I need some tips on on the training piece of it. Hobbies, which are hard to stick for you. You kind of jump around on them. Currently doing the pickleball thing, tried some woodworking, fly fishing, golfing. I'm similar. I like, what's the flavor of the day? Raised in Carthage, North Carolina. High school's
That's right.
Cameron. Yep. It's in the Naval Academy 2009. You went into Navy intelligence. So it's funny when we get into memories, it's going to talk about a lot of it coming from a guy named Andrew McGinn. The theme here is the guy doesn't have a filter and you're in intelligence. So that's interesting. You get out, you go into some industrial automation, you do some fire apparatus sales time, and now entrepreneurship with the franchise that you own with dog handling and training. A good section of this I think we're going to hit on is you're a big advocate for breaking the stigma around mental health, emphasizing you can't brute force your way through mental health struggles. So community over isolation, highlighting the importance of vulnerability and asking for help. Today, Jared's going to open up with us on his journey through an identity crisis, right? A lot of it having to do with that transition, some substance abuse, rebuilding family relationships. So excited to have you on today. Quick intro.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tony.
Folks that don't know you. First memory, I sent a note out to all my guys, 2010, Jeff Bernard comes back, says, hey, that guy's training my cousin's dog.
That was 2 weeks ago, yeah.
That's a small world.
Yeah.
Next one's from Andrew McGinn. He was same class as you, I think, class of 09, 08 senior, but he was an offensive lineman.
Yeah.
Probably one of the smallest dudes.
Yeah, you know what's funny though is as a punter, we see each other. I probably see him more than anybody else we graduated with, and we've definitely switched weight classes. So he's at my punting weight, and I'm at his offensive line weight.
Nice.
Yeah.
So he's putting in some work now. You see that transition with a lot of guys when they kind of move into, post football into their whatever service selection ends up being. But you don't see a whole lot of them that continue that like above and beyond, age of I think 35, 36, I'd say. So good for him.
Yeah.
but yeah, Andrew was he was a dog. You're real small. I think there's probably a mutual agreement across the team that he, a smaller O lineman, probably one of the toughest guys. Would start a lot of fights, and a top contender for the future CTE award that's going to come out one day, I bet.
Yeah, he had a lot of concussions.
Yeah, yep, tough as nails. What do you have to say about you? Jared is no stranger and makes friends wherever he goes. He's one of the most confident people I know. So he carried a persona of confidence that he will tell you exactly what he's thinking. So there's that no filter piece. But he'll give you the shirt off of his back, no matter the situation. Guaranteed to break the ice during an awkward conversation. He knows no filter.
I could make it awkward for some people too.
Nice. Hey, that's always kind of fun, for me. Said to ask you about your laser hair removal.
Oh man. Yeah, I guess we can go there.
Well, the next guy, Dan Ritchie, he had a one-liner for me. I guess he was your roommate. Is that right?
Yeah.
He said,
Dan was my roommate the last 2 years we were there.
What he had to say was he is the most knowledgeable when it comes to body hair management. So what's that?
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. So if we go this route, we're probably going to want to keep this one off LinkedIn, but
we don't have to. I just brought it up, and we could always cut it.
Well, I can tell you the PG version. So, like you can see, I'm hairy. I'm like a Wolverine. And
yeah.
And when I went to Navy, I wasn't recruited for football. As you know, I was a walk-on punter, and so the first 2 years I was there, and I was out for new mill formation every day. And I remember our plebe year. This was probably in the first semester. They came up, and I had a really good uniform. I'm OCD, and that's part of what we'll talk about today. But like, I had a really good uniform, but there was one detail that I overlooked, and that's that I had one eyebrow. And
oh man,
they came up to me, yeah, and they came up and they said, "Smearman, one eyebrow, 5 points off." And I mean, what did they ever do with those scores? They were just trying to make sure you didn't look like a dirtbag. But I don't know. I was so offended that that they called me on my unibrow. So first stop, I went to Walmart when I had Liberty the next opportunity, and I bought this Sally Hansen do-it-yourself wax kit, and I waxed the skin from between my eyes, but somehow the hair stayed there. So it looks like I had a 45 caliber went right through my forehead.
You got deep roots.
It hurt real bad. So so then I took it to the next level, and I pursued some laser hair removal, which it didn't work, and I still shave my eyebrow today.
Gotcha. Well, that's good. That's nice and PG right there.
That is the PG version.
Got it. Perfect. So yeah, that's a quick memory section. I think the theme that struck me the most was the no filter, like to talk, jovial, good around people, helps others, has a form of confidence, at least outwardly, to others. So
I think that's key. I think that's key right there, the outwardly part, because like you see people like Robin Williams and people that are smiling, joking around, they'll help you, but they're like struggling inside. That's, that happens far more than anybody ever gives it credit. So you talk about the stigma with mental health. I've always projected that confidence and wanting to help, but I've been screaming inside for a long time.
A couple others that I think about with that would be Jim Carrey, I think, has mentioned that a few times, right? I think of Chris Farley.
Yeah.
I do remember you being a pretty funny guy. You always had the jokes. Everybody could hear Jared from across the locker room, across the field, with your distinct voice. I
had a Southern twang back then, so it probably had the little twang that you could pick out.
More twang than you have now?
Yeah. It was funny when I moved down here, I tried to artificially bring it back so I could feel more at home in South Carolina, but I guess being at Navy and in big Navy for that long, it just eroded. It's not coming back.
Gotcha. Well, cool, man. Let's go. Story time. Tell us, tell us where you come from. You
Yeah.
know, tell us the journey.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks Tony for having me on here. I wrote down some notes here just to kind of guide it and you know help keep things within um, boundaries that make sense. But feel free to ask any questions. First thing is performance driven life. So just like you and all the other people who we went to school with, you go to the Naval Academy. I was a big fish in a small pond where I came from. Found out real quick that there's a lot more competition in the world. And so it was humbling. I wasn't the fastest running the PRT. Definitely, couldn't compete with some of the superior athletes that we had in our class. And so I started to kind of learn that the world is much bigger and there's always going to be somebody that can outperform you. But that didn't change the mindset. There was still this, I have all these accolades from high school. And at Navy, it's a really good equalizer, but it's also not a good representation of what the real world looks like. For example, what became real fun for us was, and maybe you did this, but we'd go to Dahlgren Hall if we had an argument during the week and we couldn't go on Liberty. We'd say, all right, well, if we can't settle this, let's go fight it out in the boxing ring. I don't know if you ever did that or if you had the time to do that, but this was
No,
during the
never did.
time I wasn't on the football team at the time. And so we'd just go and we'd pummel each other. And first to draw blood wins, and then you'd shake hands and you'd go about your business. Well, you go in the big Navy, and you can't settle things like that. You get used to dealing with alpha personalities, and then you've got a bunch of snowflakes that you come in contact with. And I remember one time I told one of my sailors, because they had no attention to detail on the presentation that was going to go before the admiral. I said that absolutely sucks. You need to fix that. And I got in trouble. I got reprimanded by their O4 for giving feedback on something that was, it was a known expectation. This needs to look tight, and they were just being lazy. And so I just really started struggling with coming from a world of performance at the Naval Academy to transitioning into big Navy. And when things weren't clicking just right, or I had leadership above me that disagreed with how I wanted to handle things, I started second guessing myself. And
Sure.
when you're around people that perform and think the same way, and there's military groupthink, and then you shift into a different environment, sometimes it can be hard to assimilate. And for
Yeah. What was
me,
that feedback like when they were like, we got reprimanded for it? I mean, one, what was the feedback like actually to that sailor?
yeah,
Not like, hey, this looks like. What do you remember exactly how you delivered that?
yeah. So, well, there's a specific background that I think is important here, and it was how the structure of the command was set up. I was direct support, so I didn't actually in my first tour have direct report sailors. I direct supported from Washington D.C. to the aircraft carrier.
Gotcha.
And so this was I was in charge of the watch, but the people that were on the watch besides me were ship's company. And so when I was working with them, I didn't, this was a get thrown into the fire type deal because I was the first one at this new command where we did the direct support. And the feedback that I gave was, this is horrible. Why is this like this? This sucks. We need to fix this. It wasn't like you suck. It was, this sucks and we need to fix it. Well,
Yeah.
they didn't like it. And because I was in the staff command and not the ship's company command, it was this pissing contest. And, oh, I'm going to go tell my department head on you. And I'm sitting there thinking,
So almost like acting like an advisor role, would you say?
yeah,
So with
yeah,
like the dotted line advisor versus okay.
yeah, Yeah. So I had no HR responsibility, if you will. Like I had no direct input into fit reps, but when it came
Gotcha.
down to it, like our watch was in charge of the threat warnings for the whole strike group.
Gotcha. All right. So then fast forward, how'd the reprimand go?
So I actually got called into the O5's office and they said, you can't talk to the sailors like that. And I
Okay.
was like, what am I missing here? Because I saw nothing wrong with what I said. This
Okay.
needs to be fixed. Uh, and so
If you
then
could
I
go
was,
back, would you have changed the way you delivered that?
now I would, now I would,
Okay.
is to be effective. That was a grueling tour. That was where I probably got beat up the most because of the dynamics. But now I think I would, to be effective, knowing that I had 9 months of deployment with them, I'm not going to make life more difficult for myself and, piss in the wind. And that's exactly what
Gotcha.
it seemed like.
What made it a grueling tour?
Well, so I had two lieutenants that were watchstanders. I was the ensign that joined the ship, so they were ship's company, and then I augmented. And when we were out there on deployment, the admiral took favor on me. He said, you're doing an awesome job. I want you in the seat when we're doing high threat transits. I want you running the watch. And there just seemed to be like this command headbutting. And I tried to, it was a game of perception management. Like I needed my team to
Yeah.
accept me as the watch team leader. But at the same time, like I was internally second guessing, like, what is going on? Like, why does this stuff not hum like, the Naval Academy tells you it's going to hum? You're going to get in there, be a leader, take care of them. And I was getting them food from the Admiral's mess to take care of them because their mid-rats or their midnight rations were horrible. And I'd try to do everything I could think, and I still wasn't received as like a member of the family. And it was really hard. And so I started
Okay.
second guessing my contribution.
Got it.
It was lonely.
Gotcha. Well, what happened after that then? Let's keep going.
Yeah. So I got home, and my wife and I had gotten married right before deployment. And so when I got back from deployment, I didn't know how to process the quiet. It was stress free. I didn't know what to do with that. I was used to sleeping under the jet blast deflectors. That would put me to sleep, and now it was quiet. I didn't have things to worry about. And so I'd start manufacturing in my head things to worry about. Oh, what if this goes wrong? Or what if this goes wrong? Or what if this doesn't happen? Or what if I let the sink on?
Yeah.
And that's really where my OCD started to really go haywire. And so I would create this level of stress that kept me at equilibrium from where deployment had me.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think that's normal. I think that's normal because I do a lot of the same things. You
Yeah.
know,
And
well,
then
what if? You know,
exactly the what ifs, catastrophizing,
we're kind of trained to.
everything.
We're all trained to do that.
Yeah.
You know, so that was a big tour. You come home, things quiet down. Is this where transition happens, or did you have any other Navy stuff going on?
No. So get back. And again, I'm one of the first ones in this new model of deployment for the officer side on this watch. And so I get back, and there's not a depth chart of people to support the next carrier deployment at this point. And so the people that were in line, that whole thing got compromised because there was a officer that got sent home from the carrier for two alcohol related incidents back to back in port calls. So this officer gets sent back, walked away from that tour with a medal, by the way, but that officer got sent back. the guy that deployed before me, his wife handed him divorce papers on the pier when he arrived from his deployment. So he
that's
said,
bad.
I'll go. And then there was a short cycled aircraft carrier, the Lincoln, that started workups within 5 months he was supposed to do.
Mhm.
So I got tapped to go back on deployment, to where when it was all said and done, I was at sea for 17 months out of that 33-month tour. And
Goodness.
it was hard.
Did that help at all with your what's next type of, get away from the quiet part of it, do you think?
It did. It wasn't effective in helping me manage it, or
Yeah.
shed the stress, but it
It just fed
definitely
the addiction.
fed the addiction.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
It
Okay.
enabled me to persist like that.
Any cool stories from that deployment you can talk about?
Um,
I think you're the first Intel guy I got on here. Well, no, that's
yeah,
not true.
I'm colorblind, so that's how, people may wonder, you know, I wasn't on the front lines on the football team. Probably the closest I could have gotten hurt was they used me as the punting dummy for the cornerbacks at practice. They weren't going to sacrifice Greg Vettito or Kyle Delahook's leg, so they'd use me. But good stories. I'm gonna have to come back to that. I've
Okay.
got
No big
I've
deal.
got good Navy stories, but on those deployments, to be honest with you, Tony, you think the guys in submarines, they don't see sunlight, but for my first deployment, I was so committed to performing. I didn't see sunlight in the first 60 days. I stayed inside the skin of the ship for 60 days. I didn't see sunlight.
Goodness. How does that
I-
look? How does it look like for us, say Marine Corps guys that don't get on a ship? So, Intel guy doesn't see the sunlight for 60 days. What are you doing? Like, how's your desk set up, and like, paint the picture for us.
Yeah, so for me, sorry, my dog, Sheriff, off. So for me, being a graft on, I would stay in some excess or overflow room, and my stateroom was outside the AC boundary. So if we didn't have the door, closed tight, it was, the Arabian Sea hot air was blowing in through the door cracks. And so I slept in the room with, I think I had three other roommates. And
Yeah.
then when I would go to watch, my watch center was maybe 50 feet from my door. And there's 6,000 people on these engineering marvels. I could go all day and see 15 people max. That's because the life that we lived at Navy was, everything's got to look like this. You got to do this, call you out on the bulkhead. You got to perform this, and don't mess it up. And I was so dedicated to not messing up that I lost sight of, hey, I've got to take care of myself. I've got to actually work out. When I took the PRT, it was like one of the only times I worked out in 6 months. Dude, I could do like no push-ups. I
Nice.
I went from outstanding to like uh WTF level.
Good.
So it wasn't healthy. And it was just me feeding on the fact that if I mess up, somebody could die. If I mess up, somebody could die. And that's
Yeah.
how I lived every minute.
I got you. There's a period of your life when you can get away with that. I think I did it, where you don't work out, you don't take care of yourself. You can go to sleep, you can wake up, and it doesn't bother you. But at some point, it does start to creep in. And for me, that number was probably around 35 zone, years of age. I was like, oh, I need to figure out how to eat right. I need to figure out which kind of vitamins to take now, because all this crap food. I need to know, I need to get the sleep. I need to hang it up. Things like that were very foreign, and there's no playbook for that, because the playbook is, perform, think ahead, what's next, and at some point that that table flips, and you got to figure those things out. on top of the performance piece of it, you know. So
Yep.
that's, I think that whole there's a lot of things out there that is a young man's game where people excel by doing that, but at some point it's going to catch up. Which in this case,
It's caught up to me. I
yeah,
just started those Zep bound shots because I can't lose weight for anything. I mean, I used to could just drop 10 pounds, and
yeah.
and now that and we'll talk about my vices, but now that I've shed all those unhealthy ones, my wife is okay with me getting a motorcycle um,
Uh-oh.
to live some youthful um,
Feed to
picture.
feed the to feed the addiction.
Yeah, but I've got to get healthy, so I've got to lose some
So that's
weight.
your goal. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I want to get into your transition, but I also want to kind of go back to Navy football time because I get a lot of Navy football guys on here. Do you have a good coach story? I like to ask that one to the guys, like, hey, I remember this about this coach, or there's
Oh
this
yeah.
funny time when. So go ahead, because you were a humorous guy,
Oh
so I'm sure
yeah.
you got one or two.
Um, yeah. So probably, and you can imagine, because you lived through them both. But my first year on the team was with Paul Johnson, and the second year, or my senior year, was with Niamatololo. Two completely different, mouths. If Coach
Sure,
Niamatololo was pissed, he would say Jiminy Christmas, and if you heard him say Jiminy Christmas,
it was
watch
bad.
out. Well, Paul Johnson, when Matthew Overlander, he snapped one into the ground. He was snapping to Greg Vedeto, and he goes, Obi, you are you are perfectly or you're a waste of perfectly good sperm and egg. You should have been a blowjob.
Yeah, that one's come up a couple times.
Yeah,
Thank you, Obi Oberlander.
yeah, he's a great guy though.
Yep. Anything else?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I was kind of the punt dummy. I walked on, and I think I was probably sixth string. Um, but we would always play punt golf out on Rip Miller. So while you guys were like really grinding it out, it's freezing cold off the Severn River, and the wind was blowing in on you, we were playing punt golf, and this was all of us. Like Scott Ryder when he came over to Snap, and Chad Peterson when he came over to Snap as well. Like we were all playing punt golf, but Matt Harmon would always stand off to the side, and he would kick these field goals, and he'd be very deliberate, and so he'd start trying to throw the footballs at his head to see how much we could get his head to rebound, hitting him in the helmet, and then that became actually a trend. So we were always watching out for each other because anytime somebody was practicing really focused, everybody else we're gonna snipe them because
No.
there's only so much time that you could effectively kick because your leg starts to get tired. So
Hey, you could say, hey, coach, this is a way to insert distraction
yeah,
while I'm trying to kick.
exactly. So yeah, I honestly the journey since Navy, I haven't been in contact with a lot of buddies. I wish I could remember more of the the stories, and I'm sure if somebody said something, it'd pop back in. But
Yeah,
I,
that's
I I would say that probably the one thing that I've always kind of felt, and I wouldn't have felt like this if I was just in the brigade, but like I never had to work as hard as like the linebackers or sacrifice my body, and I've always had a sense of guilt with that. Everybody's like you're part of the team, but now when we were doing summer workouts, I would be one of those guys out there just running as hard as I could because I didn't have to contribute and sacrifice my body on the field. And I'm surprised nobody beat the shit out of me because I was, in the locker room afterwards, after practice, because it's easy to set a running pace when you've got nothing to do but kick a ball and run. And I've always kind of lived with some survivor's guilt from that.
I got you. Well, don't, I guess. I don't know what I'm supposed to say right there, but I feel like there's probably there's similar ways of feeling that uh, for this group.
Yeah.
And that could be on a lot of things. It's anytime you're part of a close knit group and you don't feel like you're doing everything you can to
Yeah.
support something, absolutely comes into play.
Yeah.
So, but that's like a double edged sword with the whole thing we were talking about earlier, where you know when you are doing everything that you can, or say when things don't go that way, um, that's where flip side of it can be a bad thing as well. So
Yeah, absolutely.
it's funny how that balance and dichotomy works on like everything. Uh, so transition. Let's go ahead and get into that. If you're good with it.
Yeah.
You get out of the Navy. Where you end up?
I went through a recruiter for developmental growth was how it was sold. So this is through Alliance Careers, and I applied like a headhunter
Yeah.
for jobs, and they did right by me. They gave me an opportunity to interview for all these companies, and when I interviewed for the automation company I landed with, I found out there was an opportunity that was within 4 hours of my parents, an hour of where my wife's family was going to be landing. So I said, let's do this. And having managed, satellite programs and, project management portfolios in the Navy, I said, awesome. This must mean I need to get my project management professional certification and go be a project manager for automation. And so that was the first move that I made out of the Navy.
How'd it go?
So I'm going to go to your website where it says I'm creating content to help myself and others grow, embracing failure as a foundation for building exceptional habits of thought and resilience, empowering us to thrive in a world that values sharp, adaptable mindsets. So the word failure comes to mind because this was the first time I actually ran into a brick wall and felt inadequate as a human. I felt like a failure. I felt like all of my hard work that I'd poured into, my growth up to this point, was just falling away. And where that came from, I was handed a project that was supposed to be delivered in 9 months. The project manager on this job was removed from the job, and it was supposed to be delivered at 9 months. There was no mechanical design at 7 months. And I'm supposed to come in and fix this project? Okay. Well, I don't want to let anybody down. I'm going to pour my heart and soul into this thing.
Because that's what you do.
That's because you figure it out. And, there's people in France in the executive suite that I'm on phone calls with. I've been out of the Navy for all of 2 months, and I'm having corporate discussions with the C-suite, and I'm doing it confidently and as competently as I can, but I'm not getting any reinforcement.
Are you able to describe what the project looked like what it was?
Yeah, it's tier one automotive. So like
Okay.
you were in food and beverage. So this was, you've got the major automotive companies. Well, they have tier one suppliers that make very specific projects, but it's multi-million-dollar equipment because the throughput has to be,
Yeah.
With
Heavy.
exactly.
I
And so
always
this,
used to try and recruit people from auto because I knew where they were coming from, the younger ones, knowing that they would be, on top of things.
yeah, and it's
Stick with that.
cutthroat too. Like
Yeah.
if you're weak, they will find it and they will twist that knife into your side. And so
Sure.
for that, that year, I was calling the attorneys and saying, hey, this is not, y'all need to step in. And they said, no, I'm not going to, this is going to be all right. Well, it went downhill real fast. And I think probably the most disheartening thing for me was in the Navy, and I'm sure in the Marine Corps, but they always said if somebody is off, ask them if they're okay. And if they say no, then you say, are you going to hurt yourself? And I was sitting on this floor. I had a programmer, veteran programmer, just absolutely amazing dude who got talked down to all the time by the, his side of the house. Because just like in the Navy, you'll see a consistent theme. I'm given all the responsibility on the watch floor. Here I'm the project manager and I own the profit and loss, but I have zero control over my people. Like I don't do evaluations for these guys because it's not set up that way. The project structure is where there's a engineering manager for each department. So this programmer, I was responsible for his work, but I couldn't, I couldn't do things in the HR side. Well, anyhow, I walked up to him and I said, "Hey man, are you okay?" And he said, "No." I said, "Are you going to hurt yourself?" And he told me how he was going to kill himself that day.
Goodness.
And so I called my pastor up. I didn't know what to do. I was like, do I call 911 or do I try to? So I just called my pastor. That was the only thing I could think to do. And I said, I know it's your day off, but I need you to meet me at the church. So I took him, got him help. And then when I told his management what had transpired, so they were aware, because they obviously had, if they were in charge of putting another person in that spot, they needed to know that there was major issues. And the response I got back was, I thought he was more mature than that. And when the manager said that, Tony, I can't express to you how mad and sad it made me feel at the same time. But if I could have acted out the physical violence and rage that was going through my body at that time, this guy had done nothing wrong. He had sacrificed his family time. He had sacrificed, so much for this project that the company should have owned was a disaster. But they kept pushing him and pushing him and pushing him. And I tried to advocate for time off and company wouldn't give it to him. And I broke down crying, man. I was like, I was watching him get help. I watched his wife come in and hold his hand, and he just like, he had lost focus on the things that are important because the company had driven him like this. And
So it was just like the compounding effect of the pressured timeline on this project and getting it done type of deal that was bugging him.
over an automotive part, a stupid automotive part. And there's no
What
excuse
time
for
was
that.
this? Like what year? Do you remember what year this was happening?
This was in 2017, 2018, because I got out in 17.
Okay,
So this would have
pre-pandemic.
been,
Okay.
yeah.
Gotcha. Because I remember during pandemic times and automotive and no new cars and imports and everything being backed up. I was thinking maybe it was part of that. So that's what I asked.
No,
This is just normal day to day before that even happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those automation guys are pillars when you got a good one. I know a couple of them, being in the manufacturing side of things, I, always tried to keep a good relationship with those guys when I needed them, their help, and so smart, dude. The guys that get into that, very special skill set that's not going away. Demand was high before. It's only going to get bigger, especially with this whole AI thing.
And he was a double threat too, because he could do the PLC programming, but also robots. And this was usually structured where they'd have the robot programmers and then they'd have the PLC programmers. He did all of the above.
Yeah. Something I think about often right now is the future. What's next with that and with AI and, jobs forecasts. You think of industrial automation. Okay. Not going away. Demand's high. I saw something the other day. I wrote it down, which was because something that also kind of bugs me sometimes is learning how to promote yourself through social media, because I'm not a huge fan of it. Connection over comparison is something I'm just trying to remember. But the whole promoting yourself online is kind of normalized, becoming newer, and it's more of a self-preservation thing, I believe. Okay, so here's something on those jobs. 800 million jobs will disappear by 2030 with AI and automation. 25% of those jobs will be high risk. I don't know what that means, but I can kind of make some assumptions. 2.25 million jobs are already using robots, and 50% of all jobs will be automatable. So I thought that was kind of unique, and yeah, it's just something I wrote down the other day, just kind of thinking about that, and it's like, oh, stay the course. It's okay.
Those are sobering numbers.
Yeah. I mean, dog handling is not going to be a robot thing. So you're good.
It's relational. Yeah. You got to have emotions.
It's something to think about. You got kids. No, I'm thinking about, okay, what should my kids like? Where do I steer this rudder? It's no longer work hard, 9 to 5, and it might be, who knows? Just kind of brainstorming that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've got kids. We've got 4 kids, and I've often thought about the landscape of what they're walking into, from a work ethic standpoint, culturally, to opportunities. Every time I have a skilled laborer come to my house to fix something, I'm like, man, I wish I had gone that route, because to fix an AC unit now is $20,000, or to replace it's $20,000. And I bought into the Kool-Aid of like, you have to have a world-class education. I've met so many salt of the earth people that just have joy in their life. They haven't bought into what society tells them they have to do to be successful and happy. And I actually am envious of that, because I thrust myself into, you got to do this. You got to do this. This is how you're going to be successful. And I don't know about your experience when you transition, Tony, but nobody in corporate world cares about fit reps. Nobody looks at these things and says, oh, one of 12, this is what the asterisks mean in the top 2 lines, all these power strokes on the fit reps.
Yeah, agreed.
I had some expectation or a sense of entitlement, if I'm being honest. When I got out of the Navy, I thought I was going to be the cock of the walk. Everybody was going to see me in these opportunities, and that's not how it works. That's not how it works. And that was a piece of humble pie.
What happened to that guy? Your programmer?
Yeah, he moved on to a different company that appreciated him, and he's excelling. He's like nice. The leader. It's really good to see that.
Environment's so important.
Yeah.
And you don't realize that until you have to start doing the health stuff. So you end up leaving. Okay.
Yep.
How'd it go? They voluntarily you decide to move on. Okay.
Yeah. So every time I've volunteered to leave every position that I've left, in search of the next opportunity. And I always made sure that I never burnt bridges. So you'll see that I came back to that original location once there was a management changeover. But I always gave a turnover 1 to 2 months. Like, it wasn't a 2 weeks notice, because I looked at my experience and how I was handed nothing to work with, and I didn't want to perpetuate the problem. So whoever was identified as my successor, it wasn't about the company. It was about that person and the relationship that I tried to build with my peers. I didn't want them to have a position behind, the 8 ball from the start. So I would always give enough of an off ramp to support my successor.
ShamWow. You do fire sales. What made you come back to this company with the management change? What it sounds like.
Yeah. Actually, the guy that became the head honcho, he he was a project manager that I interviewed, saw his gifts. His name's Joe Garcia, and he's a um, he switched companies um, later, but he was a really good general manager,
So good guy to
and
work for.
he was a Marine. Yeah,
Oh,
and I got to see what his what he was made of as a project manager, and I knew that we had a lot in common, so I came back to work for him.
gotcha. And it ended up going better?
Yeah, it did. It did. And then he departed. There was an acquisition of our automation company, and then I had an opportunity to become an entrepreneur at that point through dog training, and so that's where the off ramp took place the second time.
All right. So what drew your interest into that? Let's go into that now. Is why?
Why
Why'd
the
you go
dog
into that?
training?
Yeah.
So, um, I don't know if you've struggled with this, but it's like every every time I work in a environment that's controlled by somebody else, and I'll admit control is a big thing that I struggle with. um, I never feel like I can fully employ myself, whether that's from a relational standpoint, whether that's a talent standpoint, whether that's a um, just giving ideas and having them be entertained. I always felt like there was something that you talk about leave it all on the field.
Hmm.
I feel like there was always stuff in reserve because it wasn't getting tapped into, and I knew I could
Yeah.
always trust myself to care about anybody under my care. So
Yeah,
I've
I can 100% resonate with that. I'm trying to get Eric Catani on here, and he's like, "Yeah, in a little bit. I'm about to start 3 companies." I was like, "Dude, I want to talk about that."
yeah.
So
Now,
let's
now what
talk about yours
what he's
experience.
done though is he's bootstrapped, and I have an immense amount of respect for anybody that can have an idea from its inception, turn it into something kinetic, and see it through.
Yeah.
I always wanted to be a business owner. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Didn't have confidence in something enough that I would go out on a limb and do it.
And
So,
go all in on
right.
probably is
So,
what it's going to require. You can't
100%,
half-ass it. Yeah.
100%. And so, for what I ended up doing is I bought a franchise. So you're paying down the risk because somebody else started it up. You pay royalties, but they've got a marketing set up in the background that's all been thought out, and you learn it and execute. And so, and we can dive deeper into this, but I had turned to because of all my self-deprecating thoughts. Meanwhile, I did the automation stuff, I did the apparatus service, I did the automation again. I'm in turmoil during that period. Like my mind is on fire because I'm still catastrophizing the what ifs. What if this project doesn't go good? What if, just this and this and this? So I turned to alcohol and COVID, and my AST and ALT labs were 10 times the upper limit of a healthy liver when I went and got blood work done.
Man.
And the doctor said, this is not good. You'll end up with cirrhosis if you don't stop. And so I quit drinking a half gallon every 2 days of tequila.
That's a lot.
And so then I said, well, I got to numb all of these feelings because at this point I'm trying not to show weakness. I don't want to I don't want to have to say I need help. And we'll get to my price of admission, but it's learning how to ask for help because I was on a one track highway to self destruction. So I turned to cannabis, and I it didn't hit me the first couple of times, but when it did hit me that third time, it was a 25 milligram gummy. I was in outer space, and I got videos of me laughing with my little 10-pound dog licking my face. It was a great time, and so I was like, I wish I could just escape to this world. And so I had 3 years of just, I would get home and I would get absolutely ripped out of my mind because I was trying to escape my mind. I couldn't live in my mind.
Sure.
And so when I decided to just stop all corporate activity and pursue a life of dog training, when I made that decision, I was under the influence of cannabis. And it was a good thing because I've never taken a bet like that. I actually put a lien on my house to fund it.
Nice.
So the franchise fees it was a lien against my house, and we've been very fortunate, but this has been, it's been a blessing for me because um, I get to be involved in the community. I'm not just driving from one spot to the office and back every day. I'm out in the community, giving
Yeah.
people their life back. And so now I'm dealing with my mental issues without that. So
Gotcha.
it's tough.
I'm I'm right there with you. I was a heavy drinker. Um, you know, I in the past year, it's not a daily thing, but when I would do it, it was like go time.
Yeah,
And just a couple months ago, I decided to give it up for good. Was that going to be for a year, 5 years, forever? I don't know. But I'm gonna see where it goes. And so far, so good. Something to supplement that. I have dabbled in mushrooms, and
yeah,
that's been a good one because when you go too hard on that, it ain't too fun.
yeah,
It's a little different and very humbling, and you want to keep your ego in check. I think it's the right mix. It's not so much of an ego amplifier, something
sure.
that booze does.
Yeah,
So
I made the same decision too, Tony. I had my wife get all the liquor out of the house just because, I go to a psychiatrist, I go to a therapist every week, and I go to a psychiatrist every 3 weeks. And like OCD is what I have. I have clinical OCD, um, and so bad that when I first got out of the Navy, we were talking about coming back from deployment and stress level is here, but the world around you only produces this much stress. So you fill that gap with a bunch of garbage. Um, I would just start borrowing trouble. I hit a
yeah,
pothole. Was
that
that
was
a
a big thing for me.
Yeah,
Is it was a good way to kind of sabotage something good. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna
yeah,
stop doing that. Like everybody I look up to, or they usually one have a fun addiction story, and two gave it up, and great things happen. So I was like, well, let's just do that.
yeah,
You know.
yeah.
So
And I mean, I would hit potholes and be like, was that a person? And it got to the point where every pothole I hit in South Carolina, there's a lot. We have low gas prices, and you can tell from the condition of our roads. Every pothole that I would hit, I would turn around in my truck and make sure it wasn't a human being because I was like, what if it was? So the obsession is, could I have hit a person? The compulsion is actually turning the vehicle around. And I couldn't live in that space. So I would try to numb it. And my psychiatrist said, without help, without medicine, without therapy, I can tell you to stop doing those things, but you physically cannot stop doing them. It is a brain rewiring that needs to take place. And so
yeah,
that's why the mental health is so important.
yeah, that's another thing that brain rewiring is a reason why I even tried mushrooms in the first place was the whole microdose thing and brain plasticity. Done a lot of homework on that, so um, works for me.
Yeah.
So, how is the business? How's it going? You took that leap. You found a way. You went all in. What do you
I
think?
will say it is a blessing in more ways than I can actually express. Number one, we've been very fortunate and blessed to have growth every year. Our first year, um, we covered all of our costs. The return on investment was greater than our expenses, and it was a
Nice.
low overhead franchise because I didn't have money or capital to get a building. So it's mobile. You go to people's houses, you include them in the training because it does you no good if the relationship between your dog and me is great. The relationship between your dog and you needs to be great. So our focus is
Yes.
on the handler and their dog. So we
Gotcha.
train the dog, teach the client.
Real
So-
quick, what was the return on investment for you? Like sometimes when you go in on something, you want your return on investment to be X amount of years. What does that look like for your business? Are you trying to knock it out within X amount of time?
So our ROI was about 7 months.
Ooh, dang,
Yeah.
that's good. That's what I would call a top 1 to 5% investment.
Yeah. That's where OCD did help, because I go in and I'm like, I'm not eating tuna fish dinner every night out of a can. You know,
Yeah.
I got a family of 6, so
Goodness, 6.
4 kids, and I said I'm just going to hustle. And so it was a year of 90-hour work weeks, but I said I'm not going to let this fail. And of course, this past year I paid for it with some burnout, but we were profitable. And then we grew about 25% our second year, and we've trained about 1,000 dogs now.
Nice. That's a lot of dogs.
3 years.
I got
Yeah.
a COVID dog, a COVID puppy, German Shepherd.
Yep.
Her name is Pearl. And we took her to a trainer, but COVID being the way that it was, we did that. It was like 2 weeks, I believe. And she came home and she has some tricks, tricks from a like calming perspective, because you probably know, German Shepherds are always on watch, as she is. She likes to bark. Hey, this is my family, stay away. Not the typical dog that you would see out with with somebody as like a comfort dog, whatever those things are. When she came home from that, it was, life's still going on, and we really didn't give her the attention and continuing relationship that you're talking about that she did. So I think she lost most of that. Is there anything I can do right now with that dog?
I'll tell you right now that German Shepherds are some of the easiest dogs to train.
So smart.
It's not like you've lost anything. But what's really interesting, and we have 2 different models where we go to the client's home, or the dog comes to us for the day and then goes back home, because the dog has to see that the family is involved. I tell all my clients, your dog does not know how to exploit me. I'm a neutral party in a neutral environment. If they come to me, your dog knows all the different ways to manipulate you. Just like, Tony, you would know if somebody put a leash around your neck, a dog knows how much control is over them at any given time. And they're going to assume that they know best until they trust the leadership above them. So when you're consistent, the dog's like, oh, this is going to be a daily, this is a daily thing I can look forward to, and I can rely on. The dog falls in line. German Shepherds are extremely intelligent, and they are extremely loyal. And I'll tell you right now, the number one reactive dog that I see is a German Shepherd. It's not the pit bulls of the world. We see some of those, but German Shepherds, if there's a pregnancy in the home, they'll resource guard it sometimes. If I've seen it before, where if a family member had a surgery, the dog becomes hypersensitive to that. Or if somebody's got some anomalous medical condition, diabetes, the dogs can actually smell, when you're having a low or a high emanating from the mouth. They can detect your cortisol changes. So if a dog's got a lot of prey drive, we'll see a lot of German Shepherds or reactive dogs in general. They'll pursue perceived weakness because they can detect it. So my trick is I wear an athletic cup to work, and as long as I'm protected down there, then I'm good. But if your cortisol spikes and the dog is prone to respond to that, they'll take off after
it. Interesting. Very cool.
But yeah, you were asking about things to do. Our favorite command is place. I've got my yellow lab right here in my lap. Sheriff, here, bud. So this is Sheriff.
Nice.
He said, "Hey, buddy," and then he's a little jealous because I'm going to call my border collie up, Clem. And so this is my service dog, Clem. And so their favorite thing is to place. And so I've got a fire hydrant at the office, and I'll have them jump up on top of the fire hydrant, stand there, focus their mind. And so you can work on place with your dog, and it means the dog is contained on an object that's safe and physically possible. That's the rule. But have the dog challenged in a way that they learn how to work their front and rear paws in harmony. It could be a rock that wobbles. It could be a fire hydrant. It could be a paint can, a paint bucket. But shaping that behavior is really helpful because, we got Christmas this week. And if I just want them to place on the bed, that's their task. Don't get up. Don't get in my lap. Just place.
It's to go to a spot, and this is where you chip.
Yep.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, cool. Anything else about the business that you liked or you learned after taking on a franchise? Like, man, that was a big lesson that I just learned. That was important.
Yeah.
Anything like
that? I get to be the boss that I never had.
Okay.
And so for whether it's franchising or if you bootstrap, and like I said, I envy those that can bootstrap. It's just a lot more stress that you have to deal with on the front end. I'm on the hook for the performance in my territory, and I'm empowered to perform by hiring the people that I want, and shaping the environment that supports them. And then all the other environments that I had worked, there was a toxicity. And so, for me, this is an opportunity for me to be the change that I want to see. But it's also from a mental standpoint, I get to work. My favorite dogs are the reactive dogs. So if somebody tells me that there is a dog that bites, I want that dog. I want
the toughest challenges.
I want to change that dog's mindset, because guess what? That dog lives in the same space that I lived in, where I would create all this stress for myself because I didn't know better. I didn't know how to perceive the world without stress.
Fills the gap.
And so that is my favorite scenario. I would have trained Biden's dog for free. There's no excuse for a dog biting however many people but I would have trained that dog for free just for the PR. For the PR.
We need to figure out someone that you can train so they can tell everybody about it and bring you more business.
Yeah. Well,
anybody listening to this, you need a dog, want to get on later, let's do it.
Yeah.
Jared, you got it.
Yeah, exactly. I just got to have my cup.
Oh, nice. Well, cool. What about, hey, what gets you up in the morning now after all of that?
I'm just now getting back. It's funny that you asked that question, because even though I've got a lot going on for me, Tony, it's been a real struggle this past year. There's been days where nothing got me up. What got me up was I needed to go to the bathroom, but not like, because burnout is a real thing too. You can take something good and you can idolize it.
Learning how to rest.
Yeah. And I don't know how to do that still. And so now I'm just getting to the point where, admittedly, I'm walking a mile a day is my goal. Where I used to just absolutely obliterate physical fitness things. Now I get shin splints when I walk. I'm that out of shape. And I've got 4 kids that are now being perceptive to how well I'm taking care of myself. Like my 11-year-old Sawyer, who's really athletically inclined, he's like, "Dad, you need to lose weight." He's like, "You look kind of gross." And as much as I don't want him to like body shame people. I'm just like, this is kind of a nice kick in the pants. And so
it's not body shaming. It's healthy. It's a healthy.
Yeah.
It's good for
you. My wife is a Zumba instructor. I mean, she's a teacher by trade, but she's very physically fit. and we've just polarized fitness worlds. And she just says, Jared, all I want is a long, healthy life with you. And Tony, for the past so I quit dabbling in cannabis over a year ago. So I haven't been doing it in over a year. But for those 3 years, I just tried to escape, and I could not connect with my family. I was just caught in all the stress. There's years of my kids' lives that I just unfortunately don't remember because I was so self-absorbed and like.
Something I wrote down as you were talking about that was when you X the alcohol out, how your relationships with your kids got afterwards.
Well, there's a spike in, anger when you can't go to your. So the alcohol is a relatively recent thing because I did a 12-step program for my cannabis because I transitioned from alcohol to cannabis. But I made cannabis my issue because I could go back to alcohol in moderation. So I just actually on the back end of cannabis kicked alcohol for good. So I made the decision to get rid of alcohol. And I haven't done that in a while. But the relationship actually gets strained a little bit because I'm trying to learn how to interact.
Yeah, it's an initial strain for sure.
But it's gotten so much better in terms of I can actually have fun without being inebriated or without, having an altered state of mind. And I don't know why I ever felt like I needed to escape, but I've gotten more distant from the OCD since I've gotten help medically.
Awesome. Well, cool. Any good mentors through all that?
Yeah.
Who's that?
So I've learned through COVID that isolation, which was really the catalyst for a lot of these behaviors that I've engaged in over the past several years. I've been really involved in my church since we got back in, and one of the elders at our church was my mentor through my 12-step spiritual program that I went through. Grace Church is local to Greenville, and it was called Regeneration. So it's learning how to replace all your earthly idols with Christ and focusing on that. So Joe was my mentor, and he continues to be my mentor in our community group, but also my pastor. And with the stigma and mental health, I live in the Bible Belt. We refer to it as the Bible Belt here in South Carolina. There's a lot of legalism, and when I first needed help mentally, and I needed to start getting on a medicine regimen, I asked my pastor. I was like, "Do I need to pray more? Do I need to pray more that I don't have these thoughts?" And he's like, "Look, Jared, I'm gonna be very clear with you." He's like, "We have to quit spiritualizing mental health because there are chemical imbalances, and yes, can God fix those? Yes, if he chooses to, but there's also opportunities that he's given us through medicine." And he's like, we got to quit spiritualizing mental health. If your doctor says that you need to get help and take this medicine, he's like, don't be a fool, take the medicine. And that was such a relief because, you've met people like this before. There's a lot of self-righteousness in this world, whether it's on the religious side or not. And I was falling victim to the stigma. And once I got over that hump and I crested the hill and I started to see a therapist and I started to get my brain wiring managed, it made a huge difference. So I would attribute my mentorship to my pastor and to my mentor, Joe, that I mentioned.
Awesome. You take any vitamins?
Yeah, I take a mineral supplement.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's been huge for me. I did this whole gene test thing to see where I was lacking, and that's been a game changer. That and then water and the Celtic salt thing in the morning, which is all over the place. Like I think that helps because
What's Celtic salt? I haven't ever heard of that.
it's just a natural sea salt. It contains a lot of different vitamins in it already. Big one for me is magnesium because I like a lot of coffee.
Oh yeah.
So when you drink a lot of coffee, you need extra magnesium. Magnesium helps you sleep. It's a good electrolyte. On days that I don't sweat real good, like at the gym or go to the sauna, I don't sleep very good. But if I sweat a whole lot, then I lose a lot of electrolytes, which is also an issue with a lot of coffee. So I mean, that's been, everybody's different, but I'm huge into vitamins now and those
Gotcha.
supplements. And there's a huge B12 part of it, the whole um, DK2. Um,
Yeah, D I have a deficiency in. My mom does too. So I have to
yeah,
take
the sunlight
3,000
vitamin.
international units a day.
Yeah, especially for 60 days locked up on that ship without seeing any sunlight. I'm
And
sure
still
that's where it
paying for
started. It altered your genes right there.
that. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay. What's the biggest struggle you're working through today?
I try not to live in the past. Um, I got a lot of regret. Um, not prioritizing my family, escaping, or trying to escape through, you know, alcohol and cannabis. Um, Not being deliberate with my time. Quality time is one of those things that I found you can't force. You can create opportunities for quality time, but you can't force it. And so I look back. The rearview mirror is smaller than your windshield, and I've always heard this analogy. Like the reason that is you got so much more to look forward to instead of living in the past. And I live in the past a lot, Tony. The should haves, the I would have done this differently. I think I dwell too much on that, and it creates a self-deprecating spiral that I live in. And I'm trying to focus on the positive, the fact that I've got this, you know, life that I can appreciate. I have a wife that loves me unconditionally. I have 4 kids that love me, and um, my therapist told me last week, and I've never cried this hard, but it was so true. He said, "You don't know how to accept imperfect love." And man, when he said that, I just like the waterworks started. And then I was sitting in church last week, and I just hit the floor, dude. It's so true. Like I've got these
Yeah.
expectations of perfection, um, either of my performance or other people. And like I shouldn't get mad when they spill milk. But my first thing is like that that shouldn't happen. Why did you spill milk? And I worry about the internal voice that I'm creating in my own kids, um, just from the stress that I live, and I don't know how to manage it. So I went around my rear end to get to my elbow there to answer your question, but I'm learning how to love myself and how to love others. And I thought I had that
Awesome.
hacked a long time ago, and
Yeah.
it's hard.
I think it's a continuous process, man. At least for me. And Andrew Thompson, a guy I recently had on, 80 or 96 class. No, 95. I should know that. He Something that stuck out to me. I remember he said, young men understand pain, and older men understand. I think it was like guilt and regret. Um, Something I do every single morning is I usually try and dedicate 15 minutes of time. It could be first thing, it could be in mid morning, late morning, whenever the time opens up, is to write something down every day of those things, like things that I'm grateful for. Sometimes it's something motivational. It's like, or I'm thinking about next steps, and I'm looking for some sort of guidance out of people that have done it before. People want to aspire to be. Um, that has helped me. Again, everyone's different, kind of like vitamins, um, but that's just something that I've done.
Yeah.
What If you had to define success now, what would that be for you?
Live in the moment.
Okay. Ties into biggest struggle. Right. One step at a time, my man.
Yeah.
Last question. What's your price of admission?
So I'm a broken human, and we talked about performance driven lifestyles, and we've lived lives that are high op tempo, no failure. But I think at the end of the day, my price of admission is knowing that Christ paid the admission, and um, I can't through works earn that. And so to switch gears and you know talk about my relationship with Christ, it's actually understanding that He doesn't want me to live in this turmoil. He wants me to trust Him, and um, He paid the price. He's already won the battle that I continually try to fight, and so my price of admission has been paid, um, and I need to just rest in that.
Awesome. Cool, man. About to close this thing out. Is there anything else that we missed that you want to throw out there?
No, I have a question for you actually as a Marine, and I just wanted to get your take on this. But I, a lot of the guys that I have uh, been in close contact with in the corporate world, most of them have been Marines, not Navy, some of them Air Force. But I've noticed that a lot of the Marines are some of the most closed off in terms of wanting to talk about their actual struggles. And I asked one of them, um, and he said they went through a course at TBS called or there was a book or something, but like the mask of leadership or the face of leadership. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't. I'm trying to think back and try and pull that one, but I can't think of it right now.
Okay. Well, I was just going to get your take on it because, what you're doing here is you're talking about, opening up, navigating challenges and failures. I feel like a lot of the guys that I've had interactions with and I've got close relationships with, they would never admit that they had a problem. And that's what scares me is, these were combat veterans and they just didn't want to say, I'm struggling. They would just wear it horribly. They'd always be gruff and, um, but one of them told me, he's like, they went through training and it was like called the mask of leadership. And it was about, you can't show weakness to your subordinates and you can't show who you truly are. And I didn't know if that was something that um, would be a good discussion point for you, but it sounds like maybe they had a different curriculum or it was a different
Yeah,
group of instructors.
I mean, maybe that's the reason why I started this podcast in the first place. I don't know. Maybe subconsciously. But I mean, kind of getting back to the whole, what you call a performance-driven life. Like, hey, nobody, we're always taught like nobody cares. Just figure it out.
Yeah.
Nobody cares, and that's ingrained, and it's just repeated and pounded into you. From a combat vet standpoint, I don't know if there's a lot of guys that want to go there. I know a couple of them that I've tried to go there, and they went off on me. I
Oh,
don't want to talk about it.
yeah.
Um, and that's fine. Maybe one day, maybe they've already done it and closed that chapter. So I don't know. That's a mystery. That's still something that I'm digging into on these.
What got
Sure.
you to the point where you could open up? Because I really appreciate the fact that you're doing this because I know firsthand that people's testimonies about what they struggle with is probably the number one thing that I've been able to relate to. Not like this is how your mental health should be, but like when somebody says, this is what I've been through, and you can
Yeah.
connect with people and ask them questions and knowing that they're an open book, as a resource. What was that for you?
Well, I was going through some crap at the time for sure. kind of like you were talking about with the whole automation thing, time, pressure, stress, which I thought I could handle at the time. And but then so I was talking with the my class group, and I was like, hey, I'm thinking about starting this podcast, yada yada. I ended up getting Cameron Marshall on, combat vet, guy that we all looked up to, uh, played Navy football, like
He was in my
the
company. Yeah.
the ideal guy, right?
Yeah.
Of emulation for a lot of us. And he came out and shared a struggle that he had been going through. And this was COVID timeframe. This was mid-COVID, post-COVID, something like that. It was October 2022. And he opened up about some stuff. And a lot of it had to do with how things were handled at the top down with some like, this is not what's going on right now is not making sense. This is not follow this foundation, and it's not just the performance driven life part of it. It's like, hey, be a good dude, don't screw people over, be the type of change you want to see when you started your business, shaping the environment as a leader. And we saw a lot of that fall out during that time frame, and a lot of things weren't making sense to a lot of people. He was one of them. And what he was saying, I was like, dude, you're spot on. That was a reminder for me, one, to keep on charging, intelligently, and not just put your head down and run. But it was just really good, and it impacted me well. And I was like, man, I just got to keep on digging into more people that I know in this inner circle. So that's what I'm going to keep on doing. If it dies out, that's fine. If it doesn't, great. I enjoy doing them because I always take something away from it. It always helps somebody else. I guarantee you, after this episode comes out, someone's going to be like, dude, me too. Or, dude, that was good. I didn't know that. So from that standpoint, that's why I started. I guess why I keep going.
I love it, man.
Yeah, man.
I love
I
it.
enjoy it. Well, tell the wife thank you, and your 4 chickens that are probably ready for some lunch, and she's probably got prepared for them. And you know how that goes.
Yeah, well, for me,
You couldn't.
fortunately, I just started those Zep bound shots because I'm overweight, and so my appetite is low, and so I scheduled this for lunchtime because I knew I was going to need to abstain. But
Gotcha. Hey, high in nutrients. Whatever you eat, high in nutrients. And for me, I'm a low carb guy unless it's right before bed because it helps me sleep.
yeah, for sure.
Dude, awesome time. Really appreciate your time. Lots of takeaways, and really appreciate you diving into the really, sucky side of the roadmap, because like you said, a lot of people don't like to talk about it. I don't like talking about it. I know other people don't like talking about it, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it gets easier each time. So the first time
Very
was a
true.
little awkward, and now it's just like, yeah,
The truth shall set you free.
that's right. That's
All
right.
right, my man.
Thanks so much, Tony.
Take care.
You too.